everyone, it's Lucy from My Crazy Craft Life, and I'm here today with the blog hop for the Flavor of the Month card kit by Scrapping for Less. This is the March 2019 card kit, and the theme is Let's Celebrate. It's the 2-year anniversary of the Scrapping for Less monthly card kits, so that is definitely something to be celebrating. This kit is absolutely adorable and gives you so many different options to help you make celebration cards, whether it's for babies, for friends, for birthdays, anything that you can think of you can make with this kit. So we're going to get started by going with collection number 1. In collection number 1, I used sketch number 2, or the second one on the top of the page. Collection number 1 includes Ice Cream Celebrations paper by Scrapping for Less. The stamp is by Scrapping for Less. There are peel-off sticker lines by Pappy Color. I received silver with mine. You will receive gold, silver, or black. Craft tags by Doris, and a sequin mix that is by Scrapping for Less. First, I stamped the image using Hero Arts Intense Black ink. I was planning on doing some Copic coloring with this, so those are my Copic markers that I used to color this. I decided as I was looking at it that I wanted to make a shaker card, so that is what I decided to do with that panel that's on the front of it. I did end up finding a rectangle die that was the 2 inches by 3.5, and that will just fit the stamp. So the stamp will fit exactly into that, but there won't be a whole lot of background if you're just using it for like a panel or something. So that's the image there after I finished up coloring it. I left it with the vanilla ice cream and chocolate syrup because that's my favorite. I did end up cutting it out with the Scan and Cut. And then here I was just trying to figure out the papers that I wanted to use. So I decided I wanted to leave the background a solid color, and then the front panel I was going to make have the print on it so that it was a little more colorful on that end. And then I used more of the pattern paper for the accents on there. The other day I was at Michael's and there was a package of shaker card kit. It was just like a Michael's brand. It had 10 pieces of acetate and that were pre-cut. That's what I have sitting there. And then 10 pieces of double-sided foam tape. So that's what you see me using here. I took the acetate and with some double-sided score tape, I put that down over the opening on the panel, and then I cut the double-sided foam tape and pieced it together on the back of the panel after I put the acetate down. And then that was going to be the front panel of the card. So this is a standard A2 size card. So it's 4 1/4 by 5 1/2, and the front panel I made slightly smaller at 4 inches by 5 1/4. Now what I did with those peel-off sticker lines was I framed the rectangle after the rectangle opening where the shaker portion was going to be, because I thought that just gave it a little bit more definition. And then I used the accent paper, like I said, to do that piece on the back card. I used the Doris craft tags, and I just popped out that center piece because I just thought it was too thick and I really didn't need it because it was going to be covered up. So I just popped that out of there, and that's what I ended up using for the banners that are part of this sketch. Now I end up heat embossing the sentiment on this card, and I will tell you that that bottom piece, because of the heat, kind of shrunk a little, so I would not suggest doing that. I would suggest putting the sentiment on and heat embossing it on the panel if that's what your plan is, to do that prior to you finishing up everything and having the tape and everything on there. But luckily it ended up working out okay. And then all I did was pop the sentiment on top of the glass, or on top of the glass, on top of the piece of acetate. so that it can show through the window. And then I put those pieces of the craft tags on there, and then I just used a small circle to cut out on the same pattern paper as the lined piece that was at the back of the card, so that that matched. And then I finished it off with a couple sequins. So that is the first card. Now the next cards that I get into, I use collection number 2, and I end up making 4 cards from this one collection. Did you ever have an idea for a card that you thought was going to be great and then it didn't quite turn out the way you wanted it to? Well, that's kind of what happened with this initially. So the first card I'm making, I'm going to be using, like I said, collection number 2, and I'm going to be using sketch number 3. So I was just kind of going through everything and seeing what was part of this collection. In this collection, you have Happy Birthday Paper by Scrapping for Less, Floating By Stamp by Sunny Studio Stamps, Ephemeral by Scrapping for Less, Gold Foil Paper by Cartabella, and the sequin mix is from Scrapping for Less. So that gold foiled paper, I got some really nice colors that I thought would work really well for a more masculine type card. So I thought this would be perfect for that sketch, the third sketch on there. After I made it, I don't know, I just didn't really like it. So I cut all of the pieces out. I cut the pieces 2 by 3, and then for the back panel I used the piece of card or craft cardstock that we got to use that as the background. And then I just took some Distress Oxide and I ended up using a white panel of the Neenah Solar White for the back panel, and I used the brown cardstock. The cardstock that we got in this kit was from My Favorite Things, and it included Craft, Night Shift Blue, Gumdrop Green, Banana Split, Hot Fudge, and Red Hot. And then the 2 sheets of 110-pound Neenah Solar White. So like I said, I used part of the craft paper that we got, and then I used a panel. Now this again is an A2 size card, so that white piece of the panel is 4 inches by 5 1/4. And then the pieces from the foil paper I cut, like I said, at about 2 by 3 inches, and then the back panels I used were 2 1/4 by 3 1/4 inches. So like I said, I don't know why I ended up not liking how this turned out, but I just really didn't. I didn't like how I cut the paper so that it really made no sense as to what it was going to say, because there's no complete words except for happy on that first one. I mean, I know you can get the gist of it, but just in my mind, I just didn't like how it turned out. But I still think, I mean, it's still, you can use it and it'll be fine, but I just wasn't thrilled with it. So the final panel, though, I just taped down with my tape runner the first 2 panels, and then on the next panel, or the top panel, I ended up just popping that up with some foam, with some fun foam. And like I said, I just kind of used the distressed ink just to give it a little color on the backgrounds, and then I stamped a sentiment and I stuck it on the inside of the card, which I don't always do, but since I wasn't going to put a sentiment on the front of the card, I ended up doing that. And since I was trying to keep it masculine, I didn't want to add sequins and that type of thing. So then I moved on to the stamp, and the stamp is Floating By from Sunny Studios, and it's a big bunch of balloons, which I thought would be super fun. There are the Copic markers that I ended up using to color the balloons. And I just show you one of them, but I did the same thing on the second one. And I didn't really love how those turned out. I did end up using my scan and cut to cut out the images when I was done coloring them both. But again, I just wasn't thrilled how these looked. Some of the colors bled, and I don't know, I just wasn't thrilled with how the coloring came out with this. So I kind of went back and forth on what to do with them and how to use them. I end up using them in a different card later on, but I don't use it now on the second one. On the second one, I end up using sketch number 1 on the sketch sheets. I was going to use one of the groups of balloons, and that's what I was going to use for that center. And I don't know if you guys have trouble, but I had trouble reading the sizes on this, and I actually had to recut a couple things because I cut them the wrong size, because I don't know if I'm just getting old and can't see, or if it was just really tiny and I really couldn't see. But just so you know, and let me give you the dimensions just so you don't have to strain your eyes, you can just write them on the sketch sheet for yourself. The first, well, the background piece, the card is an A2 size card, so it's 5.5 by 4.25. The background piece is 4 inches by 5.25. And then all of the small pieces, I'm just going to start at the top and go to the right and then continue on to the bottom. So the first one is 1.5 by 1.75 inches. The second one is 2.25 by 1.75 inches. And these are this is on the bottom of the panel. This isn't the top of it, the top little piece. Then it's 1.5 by 3.25, and then 2.25 by 3.25. The sentiment strip is 3/4 of an inch by 3.25. And then the center piece is 2.25 square with another one for 2.5 square for that background. So I end up getting all of those cut out, and then I use the Hooray die that was part of the kit. That's a new Scrapping for Less piece that's part of the banana split level, and I cut it out 3 times with the turquoise color, or a light bluish turquoise color that I was going to use. And then I decided that I couldn't really see that with the pattern paper was so kind of busy. It needed to have another color on there. So then I ended up cutting it out in red. But I left the 3 together with the blue, and then I just popped the red over it just to give it some support and some dimension. So I wanted, since all of the pieces that I was piecing together on there were so bright and colorful, I wanted to have the background a solid color. So I used blue as the background. I used a red piece for the center square for the background. I used the red cardstock, and then I used the yellow polka dot there for that front piece. And instead of using the balloons, I decided to go with one of the pieces of ephemera, which was the cupcake. And then, as you can see, I have the Hooray on there, and you can't really see it. So I end up putting, like I said, the red on top of it, and I think that turned out much better. And to be honest, I was really happy with this card. I really liked how it ended up turning out, even though I ended up going about it a little crazy, I guess you might say, with thinking of 15 different things before I finally got to the end and decided it. One thing I did do is I also transferred the pieces of the background. Instead of keeping it those sizes, I put the 1.5 by 1.75 on the right side and the 2.25 by 1.75 on the left side, just to mix it up a little. Now this third card were the pieces of the gold foil that were left, and they actually pieced together perfectly to spell out the words that were there. And I thought that would be cool to use for just kind of a masculine card, just pretty simple and to the point, but it was really nice with that gold foil and gave you a couple different color options. Now I decided to make a 4th card with this, and I was going to make another shaker card. This is a pretty simple shaker card, and I do end up using the balloons, which I thought worked out better because then they're not kind of the focal point on there. They're just more of an accent, something else to see on there. So I wasn't as worried about the coloring not being so perfect with it. So again, I used the piece of acetate and the double-sided tape that I got from Michael's, and I was just kind of going back and forth because I kind of offset it a little bit and I didn't stick it directly in the middle, so I wasn't sure what I was going to do. Because then after I had already pieced it all together, I was like, all right, now what? Because now it's kind of off and it doesn't look right. But I end up using both of the images and just kind of putting them kind of centered within, not centered on the card, but centered within the space with the acetate with the window that is in that panel. And I just put those down. I put the sequins in there. I cut all of the different, I cut up the double-sided foam tape that was part of that kit that I got from Michael's. And I just put all of it down there, making sure that it's all going to be pieced together properly. And then I thought I used another piece of the ephemera that said Make-A-Wish that I thought was perfect for the sentiment. And then I thought it still needed a little bit something more, especially on the side where I had offset it so much. So there was a pretty large gap there. And instead of doing sequins or anything, I decided to cut out pieces of the pattern paper. And I ended up I was going back and forth on what I wanted to use, but what I ended up doing was cutting out the packages and the bags and just popping 3 of them on the side there, and I thought that kind of finished it off. Again, this isn't a super fancy card, and I thought it would be good for a boy or a girl, even with the sequins, because it was that shaker card. And then that is the final card that I made with that kit. Now, as I said, with the banana split level, I used that Hooray die by Scrapping for Less, but the banana split level also included a sentiment stamp by Scrapping for Less. And again, that one had a lot of fun celebration sentiments that you can use. Borders by Find It Trading, and then Morning Dew Nouveau Drops by Tonic were also included. So my next card, I am using collection number 3, and that's the baby one. And that's Sweet Baby Paper by Your Next Stamp, Baby Stamp by Your Next Stamp that was created exclusively for Scrapping for Less, Boy and Girl Journal Cards by American Crafts, Boy and Girl Stickers by American Crafts, and a Sequin Mix by Scrapping for Less. Now, I left that in there because I knew that I wanted to do some masking, and I'm going to show you how many times I had to stamp this out to get it to look correctly, to make the blocks look correct when they were placed down there. I think I had to do it 3 or 4 times because I kept stamping them and they just looked weird. It was like the blocks did not make sense on how they were set up. So I ended up like numbering them and marking them down so I knew like, okay, make this one first, make this one second, make this one third, and then I finally was able to get it. So it was, like I said, kind of funny doing that because I wanted to make it all one piece instead of having the blocks separate and layering them on top of each other. So I finally got that. So after I finally stamped all of the images, those are the Copics I used, and I'm going to just quickly color all of these images. They're pretty small images and there's not a lot of detail in them, so I was able to get through the coloring pretty quickly. And then I decided for this card I was going to use the 4th sketch, the ones with those little squares that are kind of put diagonally so they look like a diamond. I thought that block piece would look really cute with it. So that's what I end up doing with this card. Now I did not use a front panel on this card. I simply used the boxes and the strip, the accent strip there. And I used the banana split paper as my card base. Now that sentiment I did end up stamping and I forgot to press record, but I stamped it and then I heat embossed that with some clear embossing powder and VersaFine ink. I don't end up using it on the front of the card because I just end up stamping the image there. So initially I was going to use just white background and put the images there, but then I decided the pattern paper was better, and I was trying to make a kind of neutral card that wouldn't necessarily be for a boy or a girl, so I didn't really want to use the pink paper or the blue paper. So I ended up going with the grays, and then there's one of the pieces I got that was pink and gray, and then I used a piece of the blue, so I kind of, like I said, wanted to mix it up a little bit. And then I popped up all of those squares. Now the squares I made were 1.5 inches, and then I used fun foam just to pop those up, and I put the images after I cut them out, or after I colored them and cut them out with my scan and cut, onto those squares. And then I just used a 1/2 inch strip for that accent strip that's along the back of the card. And then I used sequins that came with the collection. Now, the sentiment I used on the front of the card was from the sentiment stamp set by Scrapping for Less, and it says, "A New Baby to Love." And then I ended up not using that heat embossed sentiment that I made, and I just stamped that same sentiment on the inside of the card. And again, I was just trying to keep it kind of neutral so that I could give it to someone, whether they had a boy or a girl. And then, like I said, just popped on some sequins all over it. I got a little crazy with the sequins. I put quite a few on there, but I just thought without having a background sheet on there, I thought it needed a little something more. So that is that card. My final card is actually the sneak peek card. And for the sneak peek, I used collection number 4, which was celebrating friendship. So each of the collections has a different theme. Friendship is 4, 3 was baby, ice cream celebrations was 1, and happy birthday was 2. So in collection number 4, you got Everyday Musings paper by Pink Fresh Studios, Snapshot Friends stamp by Stamping Bella, Journaling Cards by Pink Fresh Studios, Cardstock Sticker Phrases by Pink Fresh Studios, and a Sequin Mix by Scrapping for Less. So after I stamped this image with the Hero Arts Intense Black, I did the copa coloring on it, and I decided as I was trying to figure out how I wanted the card to look, and I thought it would be fun to have it kind of look like a scrapbook page, even though this was going to be a card. So that's what I tried to do with the sneak peek. So those were the colors that I ended up using for the shirt and the background, or the like whatever the background would be in the picture. I just did a pink color like it was a wall. And then I used some grays just to give some shadowing to the photo itself. And then the hair I had pulled out from before. And I was really excited about this one because I thought this was perfect. I love the sentiment on there that it says, "A best friend is someone who loves you when you forget to love yourself." And I'm going to actually be giving this to a friend of mine now that the sneak peek is out and I can send this card out. So I was pretty excited about that. But after I colored the image, I just ended up fussy cutting it out because it's a square, and hopefully I can cut a square out. But I got the background paper, and I used the background to kind of give it a little background. Was part of the collection, and in the collection they had this one that kind of looked like it was a pinkish color, and it kind of had like splatters on it, and that's what I ended up using. And I cut it quite a bit larger. I cut it 1/2 inch instead of the normal like 1/4 inch larger that you normally cut things when you're kind of making that background panel for it. I cut this one because the stamp itself was 3 inches. I did 3.5 inch square for the background of it because I wanted to, like I said, kind of have it like a scrapbook. So there was actually going to be a lot of space that I wanted it to see. And then I ended up using that floral print for the card, and then the green I thought accent between the colors of her shirt and then the greens in the paper is what I ended up using. And then the sentiment I stamped on that same pink splattered paper, and then I just cut it out, and I don't have the exact dimensions of it because I just cut it out pretty much to the size of the sentiment. I didn't want it to have any extra on there, so I cut it really close to the sentiment on all sides. And then I used that background again, the little bit darker area of the pink, to cut out a piece for the background on that one. And then I used the crocodile to round out the edges on that. And then after I had pieced it all together, you can see the yellow still sitting there because for the longest time I was thinking I was going to use the yellow. And then at the last minute I went for the green. But I was just kind of playing around with deciding where I wanted it to go. And like I said, I wanted that sentiment to be completely cut out as small as possible so that it didn't overlap a ton. And then I didn't want it completely straight either. So like I said, scrapbooks, can kind of be mismatched or kind of put around anywhere. And I thought, like I said, in the end, how it went, it ended up being really cute. So that's where I grabbed the green and I just placed that front panel. This is another A2 size cards. That's what all of them are that I made with this kit. I popped the front panel on, which is 4 inches by 5 1/4. Like I said, I kind of made that kitty corner on the paper, and then the same thing with the sentiment, although the sentiment I did pop up. And then on the image itself, I wrote kind of the same way you would on a Polaroid. I just wrote the date, March 2019, with a pen. I used a couple sequins at the end there just to give it a little more bling, I guess you want to say. And then that is the final, or I guess that was actually the first card I made, but that is the final card for this video. So I hope you enjoyed it. Again, if you're looking to get the Flavor of the Month card kit, you can head over to scrappingforless.com and order yours. And I hope everybody enjoyed this, and take care. Thank you.